The lake was glass when we arrived Friday evening, still, silver, untouched by the chaos of the world. That cabin, nestled among towering pines and wrapped in the soft hush of nature, had always been my sanctuary. A 2-acre slice of heaven my grandfather Warren left me in his will. Camille called it our escape, and that word had always felt true. Escape from emails, deadlines, her mother's passive-aggressive texts, Levi's latest drama. Out here, it was just the two of us. Silence and firelight. Books half-read, wine half-drunk, laughter that didn't sound forced. We'd drive up with groceries, leave our phones in the drawer, and let the weekend melt around us. I parked the truck beside the stone path I helped Grandpa Warren lay 20 years ago, before arthritis turned his hands stiff and swollen. The same path he used to walk barefoot, grinning like the old wolf he was. Camille was already inside, unpacking wine and groceries, humming something I didn't recognize. For a few minutes, peace felt solid again. Real. She handed me a beer, and we stepped onto the deck, watching the water reflect the dusky gold of early evening. "This place never changes," she said softly, leaning into me. "Exactly why I keep it," I murmured. And for a moment, it felt like we were in sync again. But peace, I've learned, is fragile. It doesn't break all at once, it frays. Subtle. Slow. The unraveling began later that night when Camille's phone buzzed 3 times in a row. She glanced at it, frowned, then flipped it over without saying a word. I didn't press. Not then. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a group chat, some work drama, or one of her book club friends drunk texting. But when I stepped out onto the porch to check the grill, I heard her voice through the open kitchen window. Low, irritated. "No, Levi, not this weekend. It's not just sitting empty, it's our space. You're not entitled to it just because you want a change of scenery." I froze, tongs clutched tight in my hand. The grill hissed behind me, smoke curling into the trees. I didn't say anything when I came back in. I didn't ask. I should have. Saturday morning, she mentioned it in passing. "Levi's just being dramatic," she said as she poured coffee into mismatched mugs. "He and Callie have been arguing. Their apartment lease is up soon. He's just stressed. Stressed enough to ask about the cabin?" She looked up, guilty. "He jokes, you know how he is." That was the thing. I didn't know. Levi's jokes always came with jagged edges. He was the type to laugh while testing how far he could push someone. Camille's younger brother, 31, unemployed, couch hopping, and suddenly playing house with Callie, his on-again off-again girlfriend who was now visibly pregnant and dragging a toddler around. Levi didn't joke unless he wanted something. I knew it. Camille knew it too, even if she didn't say it aloud. By Sunday afternoon, I'd already put it out of my mind. Or tried to. We were back in the city, our bags dumped by the door. I was half watching a game on mute while Camille talked to her sister on speakerphone in the next room. That's when I heard it again, Levi's name, followed by Callie, followed by the word space. Then good schools. Then the lake. I muted the TV. When Camille hung up, I asked flatly, "Is he still talking about the cabin?" She sat beside me slowly, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. "He just wants a fresh start. That's not my problem. It's just talk." "No, it's not. You know your brother. He doesn't just talk. He tests. He probes. He pushes." She didn't respond right away, just leaned back into the couch and stared at the ceiling like it held answers. I watched her jaw tighten, her lips pressed together in that way that told me she was weighing something behind her silence. "He won't stop," I said. Still, she said nothing. I stood, pacing a short line across the rug. "Camille, this place isn't just real estate to me. It's my grandfather's. His hands are in every nail, every floorboard. We used to wake up at 5 a.m. to fish off that old dock. I watched him build that shed. He left it to me because he knew I'd protect it." "I know," she whispered. "Then tell your brother to stop." She nodded, eventually. A small, tired nod. But the weight in my chest didn't lift. The next few days, things returned to routine, or at least, they pretended to. Work emails. Morning coffee. Dinner in silence as we both scrolled our phones. But it all felt hollow. Off. Like I was living next to someone who'd already made a decision and was just waiting for the right moment to unveil it. Then came Thursday. Levi sent me a meme. A picture of a mansion labeled "My Dreams" next to a photo of a rustic cabin labeled "What My Brother-in-Law's Hoarding." No context. Just that. With a laughing emoji. I didn't respond. I tossed my phone onto the counter and stared out the window, the city humming below like a distant war drum. Camille walked in minutes later and saw the look on my face. What now? I handed her the phone. She glanced at it, exhaled slowly, and put it down. He's trying to be funny. He's trying to claim what isn't his. Again, she didn't defend him. But she didn't defend me either. That night, I sat alone in the study, flipping through old photos me and Grandpa Warren on the porch swing, the cabin bathed in golden hour light. I remembered his voice, scratchy with age but strong with certainty. You keep it quiet out here, boy. Don't let noise take it from you. I didn't realize back then that the noise wouldn't come from strangers. It would come from family. That was the first night I slept on the couch, not because we argued, but because I couldn't pretend anymore. Peace had a price, and I had a feeling I was about to find out just how high it was. Sunday dinners at Camille's parents' house always came with a dress code, unspoken but rigid. Not in terms of clothes, but posture, tone, topics. Marlene ran her home like a stage set. Everything in its place, emotions muted, dishes presented like we were on a cooking show. Victor, ever the silent anchor, contributed with grunts and approving nods, while Levi always played the rogue. And Camille? Camille slipped into that daughter mold like muscle memory. Perfect manners. Perfect restraint. Perfect silence. The roast was too dry. The wine too sweet. But I chewed and sipped and smiled because that was expected of me. I let Marlene talk about her garden renovations and Victor share his recycled golf anecdotes. Then Levi leaned back in his chair with that smirk that made my knuckles twitch. You know, he started, swirling his wine like he'd earned it. Callie and I drove past the lake last week. Beautiful up there. Peaceful. Great for kids. Camille didn't look up from her plate. Marlene beamed. It's practically untouched land out there. All that open space and clean air. Exactly, Levi said. Callie was saying it'd be perfect for little Elijah to start school. And with the baby coming soon. He let that sentence dangle like bait. I didn't bite. Victor, in his role as patriarchal echo, cleared his throat. Better to raise kids with some elbow room. Not stacked on top of each other in some city apartment. Camille kept cutting her roast, sawing at it as if trying to focus on anything else. Plus, Levi added, stretching like he'd earned a day's work, what's the point of a cabin if it's just gonna sit empty most of the time? You guys are barely there. Might as well let it breathe a little. That's when I looked at Camille. And she looked everywhere but at me. I placed my fork down with care. The cabin doesn't sit empty. It gets used. We go up at least twice a month. It's where we decompress. Levi's laugh came fast. Man, decompress? From what? Your job isn't that stressful. And Camille works from home. You both have time. Marlene joined in, her voice the polished blade she always carried in conversation. Sweetheart, what Levi means is that some spaces are meant to evolve, especially when family grows. It's a sign of maturity, of stewardship. I stared at my plate for a full 10 seconds, letting the words soak in like poison. Stewardship. As if I were failing my duties as custodian of my grandfather's legacy. As if Levi and his chaos had earned a stake in something he never lifted a hand to build or maintain. Camille's silence screamed beside me. I turned to her, voice low. Did you know this would come up tonight? She finally looked at me. No, she whispered. I didn't. But her eyes betrayed her. Not guilt. Not fear. Just weariness. The kind that comes from knowing something's been brewing and deciding to let the storm hit anyway. Victor cleared his throat again. Look, no one's saying it has to be permanent. Just while they get back on their feet. A few months. Help them save. Victor, I said calmly, this isn't about temporary. Levi's already drawn up dreams in his head. This isn't about helping. This is about claiming. Marlene raised her perfectly painted eyebrows. It's not claiming if it's family, dear. It's sharing. That cabin was built with one man's hands. My grandfather. He left it to me. Not to us. Not to share. To me. Levi let out a long sigh, drumming his fingers on the table like a petulant teenager. Man, it must be nice to inherit things. Some of us have to hustle every day just to survive. I'm not asking for the deed. Just space for my family. And that's exactly what I'm protecting, I said sharply. My family. My peace. My boundaries. Boundaries, Marlene repeated, like the word offended her. Yeah, I nodded. Boundaries. Camille stood suddenly. I'm going to help with dessert, she said to no one in particular, then walked off into the kitchen. I didn't follow her. I didn't trust what I'd say if I did. Levi leaned across the table slightly. You know, Callie cried for hours after we drove past that cabin. Said it was the kind of place she dreamed of growing up in. Said she wanted that for her kids. That's unfortunate, I replied, but still not my responsibility. Victor said something about unity. Marlene said something about sacrifice. Levi made another joke, something about me growing moss like the trees out there. And I sat through it all, chewing slowly, jaw tight. When Camille returned, she brought a pie she didn't bake and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We went through the motions, slicing, serving, fake compliments about crust and filling. No one mentioned the conversation again, but the damage had been done. There was a decision forming around me, tightening like a noose, and I wasn't even being consulted. On the drive home, the silence was unbearable. "Camille," I said finally, eyes on the road, "did you know they were going to bring it up tonight?" She stared out the window. I suspected. "And you didn't warn me?" "I didn't know how to." "You say you love that place," I said. "But you sat there and said nothing while they planned its burial." She looked at me then. "I love it because it's yours. But they're my family. And Levi's a mess." "Yeah, but he's trying." "Trying to take," I corrected. "No," she said. "Trying to start over." I tightened my grip on the wheel. "He doesn't start over. He relocates the damage." We didn't speak the rest of the ride. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, lights off, replaying every second of that dinner in my mind. The tone, the implications, the coordinated hints. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been coordinated like a subtle ambush, with charts, with guilt, with silence as its sharpest weapon. I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with a manipulative brother-in-law. I was dealing with a family unit that believed silence could wear down ownership. That sharing wasn't a gesture, it was a transaction. And I was expected to sign without protest. But I learned something at that table. Something valuable. I wasn't just defending a property. I was defending a line they were trying to blur. And if I didn't draw it soon, and draw it in ink, they were going to move in, rearrange everything, and convince me it was always meant to be that way. It was a Thursday. Nothing special. The kind of day meant to slide by unnoticed emails, 2 back-to-back Zoom calls, leftover pasta from the night before. Camille had a meeting in the afternoon, and I was halfway through revising a policy document when the buzzer to our apartment rang. I glanced at the clock. 3:12 p.m. No scheduled delivery. No text from Camille. I pressed the intercom. "Hello." "Yo, it's Levi." Surprise. My stomach dropped. I didn't respond. I buzzed them in like I was on autopilot, then stood by the door, already feeling my peace unravel thread by thread. Camille's brother didn't believe in boundaries. He believed in testing the limits of tolerance. The knock was too enthusiastic. I opened the door to Levi standing with that stupid grin, baseball cap turned backward, hoodie half-zipped like he was still 19. And behind him, Callie, 6 months pregnant, stomach pronounced beneath a lavender maternity dress. Their toddler, Elijah, squirmed in her arms with a juice pouch in one hand and a stuffed giraffe in the other. "Hey man," Levi said like we were college roommates reunited after years apart. We were just in the neighborhood. I stepped aside slowly, letting them in. "You live 40 minutes away." Levi laughed. Traffic wasn't bad. Callie gave me a smile that was too wide to be casual. "This place is so cute. I've never been inside before." There was no food, no snacks ready, no warning. I hadn't even vacuumed. But Levi plopped onto the couch like it was his and started flipping through channels on mute like he had somewhere important to be next, but couldn't be bothered to leave just yet. Callie wandered toward the gallery wall Camille had arranged last fall, photos of us at the cabin, framed shots of the lake, the fire pit lit at dusk, us wrapped in flannel, laughing by the porch. "Wow," she said softly, almost to herself. "These are beautiful. That cabin is magical." I closed my laptop and stood beside her, watching as she pointed to one picture in particular, Camille barefoot on the dock. Her hands flared out, catching the sunlight between her fingers. "This one. This just looks like peace," she said, turning to me. "What's the school district like out there?" I blinked. "What?" "For Elijah," she added quickly. "I mean, we're just dreaming out loud. But I was reading that county has some of the top-rated public schools in the state. And it's quiet, right? Not too far from a grocery store." I looked toward the hallway, half hoping Camille would step out and stop this. But she didn't. She was still on her call. Her voice echoed behind the closed door, calm, confident, professional. "The Camille I married." The one who once told me she'd never want to live in a place she hadn't built herself. Now, her brother was planting a flag in mine. Callie kept flipping through photos on my phone after I handed it to her, trying not to be rude, but I was caught off guard and gave it over when she asked if she could see more. She swiped like it was hers. Like the memories belonged to her too. Her eyes paused on a picture of the porch with the rocking chairs I'd restored 2 summers ago. We could fit a small playpen right here, she mused aloud. And maybe a little table for coloring. Elijah dropped his juice pouch and started crying. She bounced him gently, murmuring soothing things, but she didn't stop talking. "We're just dreaming," she said again, more insistently this time. "Just talking. Nothing serious." But it felt serious. Every sentence she spoke had a foundation beneath it. Not casual. Calculated. Dressed up in smiles and fake modesty. Camille emerged 20 minutes later, her expression unreadable. She kissed Elijah on the cheek and gave Callie a soft hug, then sat beside Levi without a word. He leaned back like a king returning to his throne. "Told you we'd drop in," he said. "Can't believe we never just hung out here before." Camille smiled, tight-lipped. I sat across from them and said nothing, because I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. This wasn't a social visit. It was reconnaissance. When they finally left, Callie waving politely, Elijah now asleep on her shoulder, I shut the door and turned to Camille. "You knew they were coming." Her back was to me as she rinsed a glass in the sink. He said maybe. I didn't think they'd actually show up. I stepped closer. "They weren't just visiting, Camille." Callie asked about the school district. She planned that whole conversation. "She's pregnant," she replied. "She's nesting. They're overwhelmed. They're encroaching." She turned to face me then, her eyes tired. "What do you want me to do? Scream at them? Kick them out while she's holding a toddler and 8 months pregnant?" "No," I said evenly. "I want you to defend the place we both agreed was sacred." Her arms folded across her chest. "You think I don't care about the cabin? You think this isn't hard for me too?" "I think," I said slowly, "you're letting your brother twist your silence into consent." Camille sat on the edge of the counter. "It's not that simple. He's struggling. My parents are pressuring him. They think if we help, maybe he'll finally step up." I stared at her. "You think giving him everything he wants will finally make him grow up?" Silence. "I'm not angry at you," I added. "I'm angry that you're leaving me alone to protect something we were supposed to protect together." She sighed. "It's easier for you. It's your grandfather. Your name on the deed. You have an anchor. I just have people looking at me like I'm cruel for not sharing. And you're looking at me like I'm cruel for holding a line." She didn't answer. She walked into the bedroom and shut the door gently behind her. That night, I sat in the living room, lights dimmed, scrolling through the photos Levi had joked about a week ago. I reread his meme about hoarding the cabin. I listened to Camille's voice in my head from earlier dinners, quiet when she should have spoken, retreating when she should have drawn close. And I understood something I hadn't before. Not everyone wants to take from you with a fist. Some do it with a smile, a favor, a perfectly timed visit. They just show up. They admire. They suggest. Then they guilt you for resisting. That was the kind of theft no one talks about. And it was already halfway through my front door. The invitation came as a text from Marlene. Casual on the surface, but dripping with subtext the moment I read it. "We're thinking of having a little family discussion Sunday at 3. Hope you can make it." No emoji. No warmth. Just expectation. Camille saw it over my shoulder while she sipped coffee. She didn't say anything. I didn't ask. I should have known better than to walk into a house like that unprepared. But I still held out some naive hope that maybe it would be what Marlene claimed, a conversation. A civil exchange. At worst, a passive-aggressive hour of awkward eye contact and fake politeness. It wasn't. We arrived exactly at 3. Marlene's living room had been rearranged. The couch pushed back. A folding table set up in front like it was a small-town town hall. At the center, a laptop open with a spreadsheet on the screen. Next to it, a stack of printouts. On the far side, a tray of cucumber water and gluten-free cookies no one touched. My eyes swept the room. Levi was seated already, hands folded in mock NO. Marlene stood at the head of the setup like a seminar host. "Thank you both for coming," she said, clasping her hands in front of her. Victor grunted from his recliner, arms crossed, expression unreadable but leaning toward disapproval. "We just thought it was time to address the elephant in the room before anyone got hurt." "Hurt?" I asked. Interesting choice of words. Marlene ignored me. She gestured to Levi and Callie. "They've been going through a tough transition. New baby, job instability, rent hikes. But what they have is potential. And family. Two things that should never be wasted. Callie pulled a tissue from her lap and dabbed her eyes. Right on cue. I know how hard it must be to open up your heart and your property to others, she said in a soft, rehearsed voice. But we're not trying to take advantage. We just want a shot. A place where Elijah can run around and not hear sirens outside the window. I kept my arms crossed. Said nothing. I was waiting for Camille. Waiting for her to step in to say, this isn't right. This isn't yours to ask for. But she didn't. She stood slightly behind me, jaw clenched, gaze down. She had become background in her own family's production. Levi pulled out a piece of paper, yes, a literal printout, and began reading school rankings from the county. Maple Creek Elementary is top 5 in the state. And Callie already spoke to a pediatrician near the lake who's accepting new patients. It's all lining up. Marlene chimed in. We even looked into zoning rules and HOA regulations. There's nothing stopping a family from occupying the cabin as long as the owner consents. I finally found my voice. That's the part you're skipping, isn't it? The consent. Because you're not asking. You're dressing this up as a proposal, but everything in this room tells me the decision's already been made. Victor leaned forward. Son, sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the good of the whole. No, I said flatly. Sacrifice is voluntary. This is coercion. Callie's eyes welled again. We just thought, after everything your grandfather built, wouldn't he want it to mean something more? My blood ran cold. Don't you dare invoke my grandfather. I didn't mean to offend. But you did. Because what he built already meant something. It meant peace. It meant retreat. He gave it to me because he trusted I'd preserve that. Not turn it into a hand-me-down for every relative with bad timing and a sob story. Levi stood. So what? You're just gonna let it sit there? While we're drowning. You're not drowning, I snapped. You're irresponsible. You bounce from one mess to another, and now you want to take over something that doesn't belong to you because it's convenient. Camille still hadn't spoken. Marlene tilted her head, condescension in full bloom. You're making this very difficult, you know. This was supposed to be a conversation. No, I corrected. A conversation implies equal voices. This was a setup. Levi muttered under his breath, You've changed, man. I turned to Camille. Say something. She looked up, then at her mother, then at her brother. Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. She took a half step forward, then back. Finally, she whispered, Maybe we could find a compromise. That hit me harder than any insult Levi had ever thrown my way. A compromise? I asked, stunned. With people who came in here with spreadsheets and a printed plan for how to invade our life? They're family, she said helplessly. They're trying. No, I said, turning back to the room. They're taking. And you're letting them. Marlene gathered her notes with a rustle. Well, she said tightly, we're disappointed. But not surprised. Victor muttered, Not everything is about ownership. Levi crossed his arms. You'll regret this. I turned to leave. Camille followed, quietly. The moment the front door shut behind us, the air felt lighter, but my chest didn't. I walked ahead to the car, keys already in hand. I didn't wait to open the passenger door for her. I didn't speak as we pulled away from the house. She broke the silence once we hit the main road. I didn't know it would be like that. I kept my eyes forward. No, you just hoped I'd cave before you had to choose. That's not fair. What's not fair, I said, voice low, is having to defend a line your own partner won't draw with you. She didn't answer. She didn't cry. She just turned her face toward the window again. And that was the moment I realized the battle wasn't just against Levi or Marlene. It was against the quiet surrender happening beside me. We didn't speak the rest of the night. Not on the drive home, not while unloading the car, not even when Camille slid beneath the covers and turned her back to me like silence was some kind of surrender flag. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the darkness folding around me while my thoughts churned like water under ice. I knew that dinner wasn't just uncomfortable, it had been a line in the sand. And Camille had watched them kick it over with muddy boots. The next morning, I stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the sky lighten through the blinds. Camille came out of the bedroom eventually, hair a mess, wearing the old gray hoodie she usually stole from my side of the closet. She didn't speak right away. She opened the fridge, closed it again, leaned against the counter like the quiet would somehow thaw everything. You didn't have to humiliate them, she finally said. I turned slowly. I didn't humiliate anyone. I said no. She looked down, picking at the seam of her sleeve. You know what I mean. No, Camille, I really don't. Because when someone tries to strong-arm you into giving up something that means everything to you, the polite response isn't a damn PowerPoint and a room full of guilt. She crossed her arms, defensive now. You think I planned that? I think you let it happen. Her jaw clenched. They're my family. And I'm your husband. You're also stubborn. And you're silent, I snapped, harsher than I intended. You stood there and let them talk like the cabin was already theirs. Like I was just the last obstacle to remove. That's not true, she said, her voice rising. They're desperate. Levi's scared. He's trying. No, I interrupted, setting the mug down a little too hard. Stop giving him credit for effort he never finishes. Levi doesn't try. He floats. And every time he starts to sink, someone builds him a raft with pieces of their own life. Camille rubbed her temples. You just don't understand. If we help them, maybe Al. Maybe what? I stepped forward. Maybe he'll grow up. Maybe he'll become something other than a burden with a last name. Camille, I'm not saying we can't ever help them. I'm saying not like this. Not by sacrificing something that's part of me. She looked at me then, really looked, and something softened. The cabin means a lot to you. No, I said quietly. It means everything. She nodded once, then sat at the table. Her voice was lower now. I get that it's not just a building. But maybe if we let them stay for a while, just a few months, we could set boundaries. You know, a lease. Rules. They're family, but they'd be guests. They wouldn't be guests, I said, shaking my head. They'd be settlers. Camille looked hurt. You're acting like I betrayed you. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down an old framed photo. My grandfather and I, arms around each other, both holding fishing rods, grinning like we'd just caught a shark instead of a 6-inch trout. He used to say peace doesn't shout. It just disappears when you don't protect it. She stared at the picture, her voice barely a whisper. I remember that trip. You came back with mosquito bites and that ridiculous story about the raccoon in the trash bin. I smiled faintly. Yeah, he made me clean it up while he drank lemonade and laughed. We sat there in the quiet for a while. Finally, Camille broke the silence. I didn't think it would spiral like this. It didn't spiral, I said. It unfolded. One quiet concession at a time. One moment of you saying nothing. And now? They think it's theirs. She wiped at her eye quickly, like it betrayed her. I just wanted to make things easier. Sometimes making things easier for others makes them impossible for us. She didn't respond. Just stood and walked to the bedroom. I heard the soft thud of the door closing. Later that evening, I stepped outside for air. The city lights buzzed against the dusk, cars rolling by like thoughts I couldn't hold on to. I called my friend Colin, someone who'd known me since college, someone who knew the weight of that cabin. He answered on the second ring. What's up, man? I exhaled. They're trying to take it. Her brother. Her mom. All of them. Take what? The cabin. Colin didn't hesitate. Hell no. They framed it like it's temporary. Like I'd be selfish not to give it up. That place is you, he said. That's Warren's legacy. He built that for you. I know. But Camille's stuck between them and me. And I don't want to lose her. You won't lose her, he said firmly. But you'll lose yourself if you don't draw the line now. After we hung up, I stood under the streetlight for a while, the cold pressing through my shirt. I thought of my grandfather's hands, scarred, calloused, patient. He taught me how to shape things, how to wait, how to hold firm. Inside, Camille sat on the couch, blanket over her knees, eyes red. I sat beside her, not touching, just near. I'm not choosing them over you, she whispered. But I don't know how to tell them no. Then I'll do it, I said. She shook her head. If you do, they'll blame me. They already do, I said softly. But I'd rather they blame you than break you. She looked at me, and I saw the girl I fell in love with, the one who used to say peace was the most romantic word in the English language. Maybe she hadn't forgotten that. Maybe she just needed reminding. I'm not angry at you, I said. I just need you to stand with me. Not behind. Not beside. With me. Her voice cracked. Okay. And that night, for the first time in days, we didn't fall asleep on opposite ends of the bed. But I knew peace still had a price. And Levi was coming with a receipt. Saturday started with a text from Marlene. I hadn't spoken to her since the ambush presentation in her living room. But there it was, green bubble, no greeting, no context, just, Callie cried for hours after that meeting. I hope you're proud. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard, then turned off the phone without replying. Proud? No, I wasn't proud. I was exhausted. And I knew guilt when I saw it weaponized. Marlene didn't reach out because she cared about Callie's feelings. She reached out because she wanted me to bend. Because guilt, when truth fails, is the tool people like her use to crack the surface. Camille came into the kitchen wearing my hoodie again, hair messy, eyes tired. She didn't mention the message. I knew she'd seen it too. She was quiet while we made breakfast together. Not tense, just careful, like she was stepping between minefields and hoping one of them wouldn't go off. We had just sat down when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then answered on speaker. Hey, Levi. I sipped my coffee, not even pretending not to listen. Hey, Cam. Levi's voice came through, cheerful, almost upbeat. So, just wanted to let you know we gave notice at the apartment. I froze. Camille blinked. What? Yeah. Told the landlord we're moving out at the end of the month. No point paying for 2 places when we know where we're headed. Right. Camille looked at me, horrified. Levi, no one agreed to anything. He laughed. Cam, come on. We all know Julian's just being difficult. He'll come around. Besides, Callie already started looking at paint samples for the nursery. She's thinking a soft green with white trim. Real cozy. I stood, heart pounding. Put him on speaker. Camille didn't move. I reached over and hit the button. Levi, I said, you gave notice without our consent? Julian, man, relax. It's not like we're breaking into the place. We just figured it'd be easier to get ahead of it. You know, start planning. You mean start squatting? I snapped. Dude, it's not like that. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're making decisions about my property without my permission, I said, voice low, controlled. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a violation. Levi sighed dramatically. You've changed, man. Camille used to be warm, kind. Now you've got her all cold and legalistic like you. I clenched my jaw. Say what you really want to say. I'm saying Grandpa Warren would be ashamed. That did it. I hung up. Camille stared at the screen, her hand trembling slightly. I didn't know they were doing that. I swear. I believe you, I said. And I did. But the damage wasn't in her actions, it was in her absence when I needed her voice beside mine. An hour later, I left the apartment. I needed air, space, distance. I walked the streets of the neighborhood with no real destination, trying to calm the burn rising in my chest. But when I returned home, my stomach turned. Levi was waiting outside the building. He stood by the entrance, hoodie up, arms folded, as if daring me to walk past without acknowledging him. I approached slowly, locking eyes. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. He stepped in front of the door, blocking me. You're really going to make this into a war? I stared at him. You already did when you gave up your lease and assumed I'd just roll over. Man, it's not like that. You told Camille I made her cold. Because you did. You've turned her into this calculating version of herself. You used to be chill. Now you're all rules and territory. That cabin isn't territory. It's history. It's legacy. And you've disrespected it from the second you decided your convenience outweighed our boundaries. He scoffed. You think you're better than me? No, I said, voice sharp. I know I'm more responsible than you. And I know how to honor something when it's entrusted to me. You just look for what hasn't been nailed down yet. He stepped closer. You're going to regret this. I stepped around him, opened the building door, and held it just long enough to make my point. I already regret letting you in this far. I didn't slam the door, but I shut it with finality. Inside, Camille was on the couch, her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked up when I entered, eyes searching. He was here, wasn't he? I nodded. He tried to make me the villain again. Said I've turned you into someone cold. She gave a weak laugh. Then he doesn't know me at all. I sat beside her. For a long time, we didn't speak. Then she whispered, I used to want to save him. And now, I want to save us. Later that night, as we sat in bed with the TV humming softly, Camille scrolled through her messages. She turned her phone toward me. Callie had sent her a photo, a digital layout of a nursery. It featured pastel walls, a hand-painted name sign that said Baby Rowan, and a rocking chair in the exact style we kept on the cabin porch. Attached was a note. What do you think? Too much? I can picture Elijah playing on the dock with his little brother while Levi grills on the deck. No question. No ask. Just assumption. Camille looked at me, voice shaking. She didn't even ask. She just decided. I looked her in the eye. That's how people take what doesn't belong to them. They decide first. They deal with the consequences later. She nodded, slowly. Then maybe it's time we show them there will be consequences. That night, I didn't just sleep better. I slept with resolve. Because now Camille saw it too. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a blueprint for theft. And we were done pretending it wasn't. I left the apartment before dawn. Camille was still asleep, one arm thrown over my side of the bed like she was reaching for something she knew she'd pushed away too many times. I didn't wake her. I didn't need to. She knew where I was going. The road to the cabin always felt like therapy, winding through trees, shedding layers of stress with every mile. But that morning, I didn't feel lighter. I felt hunted, like peace was running ahead of me, just out of reach. By the time I turned onto the gravel drive, dust curling behind my tires, my heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the curves of the road. And then I saw it. A U-Haul. Parked dead center in the driveway like it owned the damn place. Levi's rusted Silverado sat beside it, windows down, empty snack wrappers on the dashboard. I hit the brakes hard. Gravel sprayed beneath my tires. My pulse exploded in my ears. No one had told me. No warning. No call. Just occupation. I stepped out, my boots crunching the gravel, breath sharp and visible in the morning chill. The front door of the cabin was wide open. I could hear music playing inside, some upbeat pop song about family or love or whatever sugary lie they needed to feel justified. I walked up the porch steps like I was crossing a line that used to be mine and now had footprints all over it. Inside, the air smelled like paint and sawdust. Callie was in the middle of the living room, brush in hand, carefully rolling soft pastel blue over the walls I'd sanded by hand 2 summers ago. She turned when she heard me. Her face lit up with what she must have thought was warmth. "Oh hey," she said, too casual, too bright. "I was hoping you'd get here early. It's better to see it in person." I blinked. "Excuse me." She gestured around the room. "We went with Lake Breeze, not too bold, not too bland. And Levi said you always loved this room the way the light comes in from the east windows, so we figured the nursery should go here." "Nursery?" I looked past her. A crib, still half assembled, leaned against the wall. Next to it was a bassinet, a folded stroller, diaper boxes stacked near the fireplace. Someone had already hung a wooden sign that read "Home Sweet Home" in scripted letters over the kitchen threshold. I stared at it, throat dry. Then Levi came down the hallway, holding a measuring tape and a pack of unopened outlet covers. "Yo," he said, grinning like this was a home makeover show, and I was the lucky guest. "Figured we'd beat the rush, you know? That guest room in the back? We're turning that into Elijah's space. He already picked which bed he wants." My voice was steel. "Get out." Levi blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Get out of my cabin." Callie stepped forward, belly brushing the air between us like a barrier. "Julian, please. I know this looks like a lot, but we thought if you could just see it, see how much it means to us, you'd understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, staring hard at Levi. "You didn't ask. You didn't wait. You assumed. You built a life inside walls that aren't yours." Levi laughed, nervous. "Camille said it'd be fine." "No," I snapped. "She didn't." He pulled out his phone, thumb tapping quickly, then held it out to me. A text from Camille. A screenshot. It read, "Maybe we can talk about giving them some space, just for a while." "She sent this," he said, smug now. She knew we were coming. I took the phone, read the message twice. Then 3 times. It wasn't permission. It wasn't a go-ahead. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me. Did you tell them?" "No. I said we could talk, just talk about it. That's it. I never, Julian, I swear, I didn't give them permission." "You're on speaker," I said, looking Levi dead in the eye. "Want to repeat what you just claimed?" Levi's face flushed. "Look, man, she gave us hope. That's all. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be." I held the phone closer to Callie this time. "Did Camille tell you to move in?" Callie stammered. She said she was leaning toward helping. That's all." "Then why is there a sign over my kitchen that says Home Sweet Home?" They didn't answer. Camille's voice broke through the static. "Tell them to leave, Julian. Right now." Levi raised his hands, faux surrender. "All right. Calm down. No need to get the law involved." I opened the contacts on my phone and started scrolling. He laughed, disbelieving. "Are you serious? You're calling the cops on your own family?" "No," I said. "I'm calling the sheriff on trespassers." Callie's eyes filled. "Please, I'm pregnant." "Then you should have known better," I said, pressing the dial. Levi lunged forward. "Wait, Julian, come on. You can't actually do this. Think of Camille. Think of the baby." You should have thought of Camille before you dragged her name into a lie. The line connected. I gave the officer my name, the address, and told them I had unauthorized occupants refusing to leave private property. When I hung up, the silence was thick enough to choke on. 20 minutes later, a deputy arrived. Calm, broad-shouldered, no nonsense. Levi immediately launched into a performance. It was a misunderstanding. We're family. My sister's married to him. We thought he was on board. The deputy turned to me. They your tenants? No. Got anything in writing that says they're allowed here? No. Because they're not. The deputy turned back to Levi and Callie. Then you've got two options. Leave voluntarily now, or face a trespassing charge. Callie's face crumpled. Levi looked like he wanted to punch something. But they packed. Quietly. Angrily. I stood on the porch as they loaded up the truck. Neither of them looked at me again. But I wasn't looking for apologies. I was reclaiming peace. And this time, I wouldn't let it slip through a single unspoken word. I stayed on the porch even after the U-Haul disappeared beyond the pines. My breath was fogging the air, the silence heavier than the gravel still settling in the driveway. The wind stirred the trees just enough to remind me this was supposed to be peace. This was supposed to be mine. And for a moment, I let myself feel the bitter irony that the people who shared my last name were the ones I had to protect it from. Inside the cabin, the paint fumes lingered. The soft blue on the walls looked harmless to the untrained eye. But to me, it was intrusion in pastel form. I opened every window, stripped the crib down, packed the diaper boxes, and took down the "Home Sweet Home" sign like I was removing graffiti from a gravestone. By the time I finished, the room felt sterile again, unfinished, reclaimed. But I wasn't stupid enough to believe it was over. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Camille. I picked up, still standing in the now-empty living room. Are they gone? She asked. Packed and escorted, I said flatly. Her exhale was audible. I didn't think he'd actually do it. I didn't think Callie would let him go that far. They don't care what we think, Camille. They only care what they can take. And for too long, they've assumed silence means permission. I'm sorry, she said, her voice fragile but honest. I should have stopped it before it got here. I let too much slide. You're not the only one, I replied. But it ends today. There was a pause. Then, what are you going to do? I looked at the open windows, the light pouring in like relief. I'm going to make it official. Later that evening, I stopped by the sheriff's station in town. Deputy Mercer, the same one who came earlier, sat behind the counter, sipping coffee and scribbling something into a small notepad. He looked up when he saw me. You here to press charges? He asked, only half kidding. Not this time, I said. But I need a formal trespass warning filed. I want Levi and Callie legally prohibited from returning to the cabin. If they step foot on the property again, I want it on record. He nodded slowly, the joking tone gone now. We can get that filed. You the legal owner? I handed him the deed. Warren's name crossed out neatly, mine printed beneath it. Understood, he said. We'll notify them by mail and phone. If they try anything after that, it escalates. Good. Back at the cabin, I changed the locks. I replaced the front and back with high-security deadbolts, added strike plates, even reinforced the door frames. Then I called a contractor I trusted and had security cameras installed, one at the driveway, one above the porch, another covering the back entrance. I knew Levi. I knew the kind of grudges he carried. I wasn't just locking them out. I was erasing any illusion that they ever had a claim to begin with. It was dark by the time I finished. I stood outside on the porch, phone in hand, when it buzzed again. Camille's parents. I let it ring. Then again. On the third ring, I picked up. Julian speaking. Marlene's voice came sharp, immediately. You called the police on your own family? I kept my tone calm. I called the police on people who broke into my property. They didn't break in. They had every reason to believe. They had no reason, I said. They had entitlement. That's not the same thing. Victor's voice boomed in the background, too loud to ignore. You embarrassed this family. You made Camille look like a traitor. No, I said. Camille made a choice. And you don't get to rewrite that. Marlene's voice dropped low, biting. This isn't over. You think locking a door makes you righteous? It makes you a divider. Levi's your family, too. He's not my responsibility, I said. And if you call me again to defend him, I'll block every one of you. You're destroying this family, she hissed. No, I said, my voice flat, final. I'm just not letting it destroy me. I hung up. One line. One warning. That was all they were going to get. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. And that was enough. The next morning, Camille drove up. I was still sweeping the porch when her car pulled in. She stepped out, hair tied up, wearing jeans and a worn sweatshirt she used to keep here. No makeup, no performance. Just her. We didn't say anything at first. She looked around, saw the new locks, the mounted camera above the door, the garbage bags full of baby supplies and pastel decor stacked by the railing. They really tried to build a life here, she said, voice hollow. They tried to take one. She nodded. I talked to Callie last night. I didn't react. She cried again. Said I should be ashamed of myself. Said this was a chance to bring everyone together. I shook my head. If this was about unity, they would have started with honesty. Camille looked at me, and for once, there was no tension in her eyes. Only clarity. I told her she's not welcome here. I told Levi the same. He screamed at me, called me heartless. And what did you say? I said I finally understand what you've been fighting for. That stopped me. I set the broom aside. Do you? She stepped closer, her hand brushing mine. I thought boundaries meant cutting people off. Now I see they mean protecting what matters. And I let them put you in a corner. I won't do it again. The wind kicked up, rustling the trees like applause. We went inside, sat on the couch, and just existed for a while. No plans. No decisions. Just the weight of everything we just protected. Later, I called my lawyer and drafted a formal trespass notice. It would be served to Levi and Callie in writing. I made copies, filed them in a folder labeled Security right next to the deed, just in case. I didn't know if they'd try again, but if they did, they wouldn't find hesitation. They'd find consequences. Because sometimes one call, one line, one warning was the only language people like them understood. The silence that followed the storm wasn't peaceful, it was loaded. Every text, every phone call, every conversation now had an edge, like everyone in Camille's family was holding a knife behind their back and smiling through clenched teeth. It started with the call from Marlene. Again, I just don't understand why you had to escalate things, she said, voice shaking with theatrical grief. You could have called me. Called Victor. We could have talked through it like adults. Marlene, I said evenly, we did talk. You held a meeting and presented a full plan like I was a signature away from surrender. That wasn't a discussion. That was an ambush in slow motion. She ignored the correction, her voice tightening. You humiliated Levi. You hurt Callie. They told everyone you had them escorted out like criminals. Her mother called me in tears. I didn't make them pack up that truck, I said. They did that themselves. All I did was stop the lie before it became permanent. Camille would never have let it go this far on her own. You've isolated her. Turned her against us. Camille's not isolated. She's finally standing with someone who won't let her be used. Marlene scoffed. We raised her to care about family. And yet you never cared about what that meant when it came to her marriage, I snapped. I hung up. That was the first wave. The next came from Victor. A short call. No preamble. You went too far, he said. I didn't bother with pleasantries. So did Levi. Boys make mistakes. They push boundaries. He didn't push, I replied. He plowed through them. Lied, manipulated, and tried to take what wasn't his. And you stood behind him. Victor's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. You've turned Camille into someone we don't recognize. No, I said, you're finally seeing who she is without your control. Click. By Tuesday, the whole extended family knew. Camille's Aunt Dina left a voicemail saying we were tearing apart blood ties. Her cousin Angela sent a passive-aggressive message about remembering where you came from. Even Camille's childhood best friend, Rachel, texted to say she hoped we could find Grace in our hearts. Grace? Where was Grace when they tried to rip apart something sacred to me? When they smiled in our faces and drafted blueprints for a nursery without ever asking if the land was for rent? Camille handled it all with quiet resolve. She didn't argue, didn't defend. She simply blocked what needed blocking and ignored what deserved silence. It was a side of her I hadn't seen before. Not cold, not vengeful, just clear. One night, we sat on the couch in the apartment, the city lights glowing through the windows, and she said, "They're rewriting the story." I nodded. That's what people do when they lose. They pretend they were victims all along. And yet, I still feel like I'm mourning something. You are, I said gently. You're mourning the version of them you hoped was real. Her eyes welled up, but no tears fell. Levi told everyone I betrayed him, that I let a man destroy our family. I took her hand. And yet you're still here. Still whole. Mostly, we sat in silence, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind you earn after surviving something together. 2 weeks later, Callie left the state, packed up her son, her things, and moved back in with her mother in Arizona. She didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just vanished. Levi didn't take it well. Camille's phone lit up with a string of messages from him, angry, erratic, blaming. He said we'd driven Callie away, said we'd ruined his life, that the cabin was cursed with selfishness, and that Grandpa Warren would be disgusted. Camille didn't reply. She handed me the phone. I read the messages once, then deleted them. Levi moved back in with Marlene and Victor. He didn't find a job. He didn't find a new plan. He just festered. Camille's uncle ran into him at a gas station and called later that evening to say Levi was a mess of pride and pain, and maybe I should be the bigger man and fix it. Fix what? The wound they all helped open? I didn't respond to the uncle. Just turned my phone off and walked out to the porch of the cabin, where Camille and I had returned for the weekend. The cabin felt different now. Not just defended, but earned. The walls were back to their original warm beige. The crib and bassinet were long gone. The security system chirped when we unlocked the door, reminding us that even peace needed a password now. And honestly, I liked that. Camille moved through the space with a kind of reverence. She lit the fireplace, made tea, played vinyl records her grandfather left her, jazz and old soul. She danced barefoot across the rug, humming along, eyes closing during her favorite parts. This, she whispered one night, curling into me on the couch, this feels like us again. I kissed the top of her head. Because it is. No one else in this space. No one pushing in. Just us. Just quiet that no one gets to rewrite. We knew the fallout wouldn't disappear overnight. Family gatherings would be strained. Birthdays skipped. Holidays cold. But the trade was worth it. Because now, when Camille looked at me, she didn't carry guilt. She carried fire. And I respected that far more than her silence. I went into the study that Sunday and finally did something I'd avoided for weeks. I opened Grandpa Warren's old journal, the one he left tucked behind a drawer in his writing desk. Camille had found it years ago, but never read it. She said it felt private, sacred. Now, I opened it. Page after page, his handwriting spilled out. Notes about lumber, fishing logs, reflections on grief after Grandma passed. But one entry stood out. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you refuse to let be taken while you're still breathing. The cabin is peace. Protect it like you would your own name. I closed the journal and placed it on the mantel. We had done exactly that. The fallout could keep falling. We had our freedom, and we had finally remembered how to fight for it. I changed the locks on a Sunday morning. Quietly, deliberately. The kind of work that doesn't demand speed, just certainty. Each screw I tightened, each old bolt I removed, felt like peeling off a layer of betrayal and replacing it with resolve. The new deadbolt clicked into place with a solid, satisfying sound, final, unyielding. I stood there on the porch for a long while afterward, the wind whistling through the pines, watching the early light stretch across the gravel drive like a benediction. Camille watched from the window. She didn't say anything, just nodded once when I caught her gaze. There was no need for more. She understood now. It hadn't been about property. Not really. It had been about pressure, invasion, the slow erosion of what peace should mean. And we were done giving it away. That afternoon, I drove into town and had the documents notarized, a formal trespass warning. Names listed, location defined, legal verbiage airtight. Levi and Callie were now officially banned from stepping foot on the cabin property. My lawyer sent copies by certified mail, and I followed up with an email, attaching scans of everything with one simple sentence. This is no longer a conversation. Camille didn't question any of it. In fact, she added her own note. Any further attempts to contact us about this matter will be ignored. This space is not available. This conversation is closed. We changed the Wi-Fi passwords, set up the motion detection alerts, even placed no trespassing signs at the tree line, subtle but visible. Not because we feared them coming back, but because we refused to let them pretend this place was neutral ground anymore. It wasn't. The cabin had returned to what it was always meant to be sacred. Still, ours. Camille and I started coming up every other weekend again. The routines returned slowly. Coffee by the lake, books by the fire, morning walks on the old trail Grandpa Warren cleared decades ago. But something had changed, and not in a way that broke us. In a way that made us more honest. We didn't fill the silence with small talk anymore. We didn't pretend. When she reached for my hand now, it wasn't to smooth things over, it was to anchor herself. And when I kissed her forehead before bed, it was no longer a gesture of habit. It was a thank you. One evening, we sat on the porch with a blanket draped over both our laps, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. I used to think boundaries were cruel, Camille said. That saying no meant I wasn't kind. I looked at her, the amber light warming the edges of her face. And now I realize that kindness without boundaries just becomes compliance. I smiled. Your mother would disagree. She can't, she said, sipping her tea. She doesn't live here. We let the quiet take over again. In the distance, an owl called. Somewhere across the lake, a neighbor's wind chimes caught the breeze. Camille rested her head on my shoulder. I keep thinking about what your grandfather wrote, she murmured. That part you shared with me. About legacy not being what you leave behind, but what you protect while you're still breathing. I nodded. He built this place with his hands. But he gave it to me with that idea. That peace isn't permanent unless you fight for it. And now I understand. In the weeks that followed, the noise from her family quieted. Marlene sent one last message, a vague, half-hearted plea for reconciliation. We didn't respond. Victor didn't reach out at all. Levi stayed gone. Rumor had it he was living in someone's basement again, full of self-pity and revisionist history. That was fine. Let him rewrite the past however he needed to. I had the deed, the silence, and the clean air. I had Camille, returned and stronger. That was enough. One Saturday morning, we hosted a small gathering. A couple close friends, Colin and his wife, another couple who had helped us with renovations years ago. No big announcements, no drama, just good food and firelight. We laughed, cooked, shared stories under the stars. When someone asked about the security cameras, I smiled and said, necessary reminders. Later that night, after the last guest had left and we were locking up, Camille turned to me on the porch. We should name it. The cabin. She nodded. Everything we've fought for deserves a name. I thought for a moment, then looked out over the water. The moon shimmered on its surface, still and undisturbed. Sanctum, I said. She smiled. Sanctum, she repeated, as if testing how it felt in her mouth. A sacred place. Exactly. We stepped back inside, locked the door behind us, and turned out the lights. It was never about winning. It was never about beating Levi, silencing Marlene, or proving a point. It was about reclaiming the life we let others step into. About knowing where the line was and having the courage to draw it in permanent ink. This wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was proof. That peace is not passive. It is something you guard. And now, it was guarded well.